Welcome, class, and welcome to the last lecture I will have for Asexuality 102. Today, I just have a presentation because there are a few topics that I want to go over. Today, I want to give you a quick, real overview of pretty much everything in this class for the first part, and then talk a bit about ace culture, history, and some of the struggles we have faced in the past. So this is just a quick presentation I made when I was at the end of high school, and then have revised it over the years when I was asked to present about this. So this is a heavily edited version of it where I cut out a lot of what we already discussed, and some of that will show up, but we'll just breeze right past it. So let's begin. So this is a little disclaimer basically saying this is my experience, is not reflective of the entire community as a whole. So, background. So we're just going to breeze right through this. So, asexuality obviously is the sexual orientation by a lack of sexual attraction. And sexual attraction, this is another way to describe this. And here's another category of different types of attractions as well that I kind of failed to mention the entire time. This is another really good chart of different attractions. Alright, so one thing I neglect to mention in the second lecture is the term asexual in general, because while it does mean lack of sexual attraction, it could also mean an umbrella term, similar to how non-binary can encompass an entire range of different gender identities. Same concept here, except it covers a lot of attraction from the pure asexual to the pure allosexual side. The entire thing is just all under the umbrella term of asexual. So that's what that means. I failed to mention that, so here it is again. That's what the term ace means. Again, here's another look at the spectrum, and just as I said earlier, they traditionally put demisexual in the center. So that's a overall review of what we talked about for the last three lectures, so let's get into some more newer material. So we're going to start out more positive and talk about ace culture. One major part of ace culture that you should know about is AVIN. So AVIN stands for the Asexuality Visibility and Education Network. It is a really big website that has a shitload of forums on basically a lot of topics ace related. It is kind of like the main community center for the aces. There's other places out there too, but this is kind of like the big, well-known one. It was created by this man here, David J., in 2001, and has been basically the gold standard ever since. I've been on it plenty of times. I personally don't care for it because to be fair, I do not really like forums that much to begin with. I mean, I don't hate them, it's just I don't care to use forum sites that much. So check out AVIN, it's asexuality.org. It's a pretty interesting place if you want to learn more. Ace Week. I know I made a couple videos in the past about this, but it was made in 2011 by this woman, Sarah Beth Brooks, who's an asexual activist, and it takes place the last full week in October, as I stated before. And this is a relatively new one. It is International Asexuality Day. This has been hosted on April 6th of the last 3 years and might be moved around next year because of Autism Awareness Week. This is just another really recent invention and that I find is pretty interesting. And here's some culture things that we have. Some big prevalent Tumblr. Well, Tumblr's dead and gone at this point. Well, it's still around. People have used it, but yeah, it's long fucking dead. Ever since they got rid of the R34 subculture and all that, it basically died. AVIN forums, we already talked about that one. The cake, yeah, the cake is a giant meme, but apparently it came from an AVIN forum. I can't find the forum anywhere, but it came off as an in-joke as how aces like cake rather than sex. Yeah, that's where it came from. Dragons. Just like the unicorn for the gays, well, we have the dragons for the aces. And memes, there are plenty of memes out there. The flag, everyone knows the flag. That's what the colors mean. It was created by AVIN users, actually, and was voted upon. It's pretty cool. So, the black ring. The ring is a cultural thing that the aces wear. They wear it on their middle finger of the right hand. Now, there is a kind of a weird story of why that finger in particular. So a long time ago, and this is really dependent on culture, but very long time ago, people, when they would get married and would propose and become fiancés, they would put their ring on their right ring finger. And then during the marriage, they would swap it to their left ring finger. And each hand kind of symbolized this. Your right hand symbolized temporarily, while your left hand was permanent. Now, the ring finger meant engaged with somebody. The middle finger, conversely, meant the opposite, means you are alone, or you're not with anybody. Now, originally there was a debate over which side the ring should be on. Should it be on the left or the right side of your body? People said the left middle finger, which means you're permanently alone or you're permanently single. But asexuals can get married, and they would have a ring right here as well. So that would, A, kind of like contradict things, and B, having two rings on your finger like that can create friction and is just uncomfortable. So people switch it to the right middle finger, so that way the rings are spaced out, and it doesn't mean that you're permanently alone. That's a little fun fact that I read on a couple forums. This wasn't Avon, it was other websites. I can't remember. This was years ago, but I thought it was an interesting story of how the ring came to be. Here's some asexual representation in media. Jughead, yeah, always liking burgers over people. And there are some Archie comics that actually did make him asexual. Todd Chavez in BoJack Horseman. He came out as ace, and he also met other married aces at the ace convention in that restaurant. Then Rafael Santiago. I have never watched Shadowhunters. I made this one years ago, so I don't know how good a representation is that, but apparently he's also ace too. So we already talked some of the good, now let's talk about some of the bad. So here's some basic misconceptions. We don't exist. Yeah, no, we do. There are no ace men. So about the misconception with that one, so if there's no ace men, there must be all ace women. Now that is not true. However, based off of like a study, I don't know how accurate this one was, so I'm not sure if they're including people that don't identify as male or female in this case. But from what they studied, 2/3 of people that were ace identified as female, while only 1/3 was male. So that's kind of where the misconception can lie, among many others. That's actually a little interesting thing. While there's probably more ace women than men, but that's not including people that are non-binary or trans or anything in that. That was just based off of one study from years ago. Don't fall in love, have sex. Yeah, we already talked about this enough. Can't reproduce, not in this case. Can't marry. Plenty of aces get married. Mental disorder, ill, that's like saying being gay is a mental disorder. It's just the same thing. It's just repurposed homophobia. It's just repurposed into aphobia. In this case, aphobia means fear and discrimination and hatred of asexual people. Does not mean without phobia in this case. We haven't been abused. No. Now, there is a trend of that where some people identify afterwards, but that has no correlation to anything else. We already talked about the celibacy one. Okay, so the whiny self-absorbed virgins one, that one I actually pulled off of a webcomic I read like years ago, and I forgot to credit it, and I can't fucking find that anywhere. So I'm sorry that I half bootlegged it from another thing. Sorry about that. And then the last ones are just quotes. They just want attention. Yeah, we're kind of like a hidden identity. If we're like a hidden identity, how are we going to get more attention that way? That's like in the Harry Potter universe, trying to gather yourself attention, so you put the invisibility cloak on. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it? Alright, so while I showed some good representation, there's also plenty of bad. And the most infamous example of the bad is in the episode House, where Dr. House, who doesn't even have this patient, is just one of his colleagues, where one of his colleagues says, hey, I have this patient that says he's asexual. He just doesn't have any sex drive, and his wife is also asexual. And then Dr. House goes, that's not possible. Through his signature practice of unethical practices, he discovers that he has a pituitary gland issue that is killing his sex drive, and that his wife is just faking it to make him happy. So, if you remember from the last lecture when we did the entire hormone run, you already know what I'm about to say. And that is, they confused, yet again, libido and asexuality. Libido is your sex drive, and that is driven by hormones. As I said, the pituitary gland right here. Most likely, the anterior pituitary gland had a problem, and it wasn't releasing ACTH and other hormones of the like. And it could screw up that whole pathway. And the entire thing about his wife faking it, that just seems like the writers just didn't really have an excuse for her, or they were either really stretched on time and had no excuse for her, or they just did not care. So while it kind of fits in the oeuvre of House because of this kind of how dickish and unethical he is, a lot of people really didn't like this episode, to say the very least, especially the aces out there that watched it. Personally, I still love House. I mean, this episode is a giant pass for me, but I still really like the show, despite this. Alright, so we already talked about some of the misconception and misrepresentation. Now let's talk a bit about the LGBT community in the past. To say the least, it was turbulent, where some places they were really accepting, other places, not so much, where they're like, well, you don't have an attraction, you guys are like almost normal, especially when it came to the asexual heteromantic people, where they were almost straight, or they were almost normal. So they really wouldn't, allow them to join because of just how normal, or how they can blend in way easier than the gays and lesbians can. Okay, so that was in the past, and there was also pushback from the ace community itself. Because of the different kinds of resistance, ace people also didn't want to join. And then there was other people that didn't want to join because we should have our own community. Why should we be lumped together with them again? So, what about the A in the LGBTQIA community? Now, personally, I don't really say, I just say LGBT because that's what I grew up talking about, but when I say that, I mean the entire community. So, what does the A stand for? Now, today, it stands for aces, arrows, agenders, androsexuals, androgynous. It means anything that starts with the letter A. That's what it means now. But back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, after the Stonewall riots and the Pride Parade started showing up in the 70s, the A originally meant ally. And this wasn't just people who supported them that were straight. It was also mainly for closeted gays and lesbians to participate while not outing themselves. Because remember, 70s and 80s were not a good time to be gay, because hate crimes, discrimination, open discrimination, really. I mean, look what happened with Harvey Milk. He was assassinated in the 1970s. So, are aces part of the LGBT community? Nowadays, yes, they are. Ever since about 2017, we kind of joined the community. That's from my experience and the way I see it. It was probably earlier than that, but from what I could tell when I was starting to be more aware to it, it's 2017, and post onward from then, started seeing people more and more open to the LGBT community compared to 2015 and before. So I did do some research, and it was about 2016, 2017 when the two communities kind of like merged together into one. But there are still some people that don't want to be considered part of the community, but a lot of that has died down, and we're just now part of the community as a whole. So right now we're going to talk about the heaviest content, SA. So skip to this timestamp to completely skip this section. Alright, you have been warned. Alright, so a lot of the discrimination that is suffered is more out of ignorance and is more social. While there's not any legal discrimination against aces, it's much more social, where you have a really hypersexualized society, and then you have people that just don't fit in, and then they're berated or badgered or discriminated for not fitting in. Again, you can draw parallels to any of this. It's the same story on repeat, the same shit all over and over again. Eventually, society will come around and actually accept it, which has happened more and more often, especially since this has been written. And now for the heaviest content we're going to talk about, corrective. Now, that is a type of that is supposed to fix the victim. I don't see how doing that will fix anybody, or make them feel better, or turn them straight. The only thing I can think that would ever do is severely damage and severely hurt people. But that's just my theory on that. A lot of things in the past was there wasn't really a lot of places aces could turn to, because a lot of LGBT spaces weren't ace inclusive or didn't really know about aces yet. Now this has mostly been fixed with any LGBT center. A lot of these issues that I've discussed here have been solved. So, quick debrief. So that was a lot to talk about. Now there is a lot of past problems and trauma that some aces have experienced. Others, fortunately, have never experienced this. So never assume that people have always experienced this or have never experienced this. Really, you just don't know until you ask, but asking somebody about their trauma probably isn't the best thing to do. But everyone has different experiences. So, thank you all for watching, and thank you all for attending this class. I know this was a really short project, but I enjoyed making it for all of you. And with that, I will be seeing you all in another time. I hope you enjoyed the class. And with that, I'm Professor A, and I wish you all a really good day.